7 days missing, 47 seconds of silence. One explosive leak that shattered the White House's Make America Fit Again line. Before 20 million stunned viewers, Jasmine Crockett exposed bruises, swollen ankles, and the truth Karoline Leavitt couldn't answer. The chamber erupted. The nation gasped because if a president's health can vanish for a week, can't his press secretary freeze on live TV? What else is being hidden from you? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The Capitol was silent, but the nation was roaring. Outside the building, thousands pressed against the barricades, waving signs that read "Show the records." And truth equals strength. The echo of drums from protesters reverberated off marble columns, blending with the low whir of news helicopters circling above. Inside, the hearing chamber was a powder keg. Every seat was packed, journalists' cameras aimed like loaded weapons, their red recording lights blinking in unison. The air itself felt charged, thick, ready to ignite. A giant digital clock above the chamber doors ticked down the seconds. 0:29, 0:28, 0:27. Each blink of the numbers was like a countdown to detonation. America wasn't waiting for a hearing. America was waiting for an explosion. Karoline Leavitt appeared, the door swinging open as if announcing a conqueror. She moved with rehearsed confidence, every step echoing, her binder clutched like a holy scripture. On its cover, bold letters, MAFA Make America Fit Again. She scanned the room with a smirk, her chin raised as if daring anyone to challenge her. She wasn't here to answer questions, she was here to silence them. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice slicing through the tension, "the president has never been healthier, stronger, fitter. Under his vision, America will not only rise, it will endure." Her tone was sharp, deliberate, designed to echo across headlines. To the casual viewer, it was a performance of confidence. But to those who had seen the rumor swirl, the bruised hand, the swollen ankle, the 7 days of absence, her words landed like gasoline on an already burning fire. Across the table, Jasmine Crockett sat in stillness, no binder, no rehearsed smile. Just a pen between her fingers, tapping once, twice, a slow beat of control. Her eyes never left Karoline, dark and unflinching, alive with the fury of every American who had been told to accept a lie and call it truth. The camera found her face, zooming close enough for millions at home to see the tiny flicker in her jaw, a restrained storm, ready to break. The seconds bled away. 0:12, 0:11, 0:10. The tension wasn't just political, it was personal. For Jasmine, this wasn't about one man's health. It was about the integrity of democracy, the dignity of truth, and the lives of those who couldn't afford leaders playing games with reality. She leaned forward, her voice not yet spoken, but her presence already louder than Karoline's entire speech. The room leaned in, the nation leaned in, every diner, every living room, every phone glowing in the dark of a bedroom, everyone could feel it. A collision was coming, and when it hit, it wouldn't just shake this chamber. It would shake America itself. If health is strength, Jasmine's eyes seemed to ask, why are we so afraid to tell the truth about it? Karoline gripped the microphone as if it were a weapon. Her voice rang out with rehearsed precision, sharpened by hours of preparation. "The president," she declared, "has never been healthier, never been stronger, never been more ready to lead. He is the living symbol of American resilience, and under his leadership we will not only be great again, we will be fit again." The words soared like campaign slogans, polished, triumphant, scripted for applause. But instead of applause, the chamber responded with silence. It was the silence of suspicion, of eyes shifting, of millions at home leaning closer to their screens, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, the pen in her hand now still. Without a word, she tapped the console before her. Instantly, the lights dimmed, and a giant screen flickered to life behind Karoline. The first image appeared, Trump's right hand, the bruising unmistakable, deep purple swelling spreading across the skin. Gasps tore through the room. A second image followed, his ankle, grotesquely swollen, captured by a telephoto lens as he struggled to step into a golf cart. Murmurs rippled across the chamber like a shockwave. And then, the third slide, a timeline, 7 days of unexplained absence, his public schedule glaringly blank. Karoline stiffened, the color draining from her face as the screen illuminated behind her like a glowing indictment. She tried to continue, voice faltering, This is misinformation. These are out-of-context images. But Jasmine's voice cut through, cold, sharp, unyielding. Out of context, these are your president's hands. Your president's body, your president's silence for an entire week while the nation begged for answers. The network split the screen, one side frozen on Karoline's stricken expression, the other magnifying the bruises, the swelling, to voyant Trump's schedule. On MSNBC, anchors whispered, unprecedented. On Fox, the panel squirmed, their talking points collapsing before their eyes. On social media, hashtags detonated into trending chaos. Hashtag show the records. Hashtag bruises don't lie. Hashtag Crockett vs Leavitt. Karoline reached for her binder, fumbling to turn a page, but Jasmine pressed forward, her voice now rising with righteous fire. You tell the American people he's healthier than ever. You tell them he is the symbol of strength. Yet every image, every unexplained absence, every whispered report says otherwise. You can't bury the truth under slogans. You can't mask weakness with a logo. The chamber felt smaller now, suffocating under the weight of the evidence glowing above. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras zoomed tighter, capturing every flicker of panic across Karoline's face. Even members of her own party shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their silence louder than any defense. The room had turned, the tide was shifting, and the nation could feel it in real time. Jasmine's final words of the exchange landed like a hammer blow. Propaganda may rewrite a speech, it may dominate a headline, but it will never erase what the eye can see. And today, America is watching. And then came the question that cut deeper than any accusation, the one that echoed from the chamber into every home across the country. What happens when propaganda collides with undeniable images? Jasmine didn't raise her voice, but her words cut through the chamber like a blade. Where is the medical record? It was a question too simple to dodge, too direct to spin. For a fraction of a second, Karoline's lips parted, ready with another rehearsed lie, but nothing came. Her throat tightened, her eyes flicked downward, and the silence began. 1 second, 2, 3. Cameras zoomed in, searching for any flicker of movement. Her hand hovered over her binder, but the pages inside were useless now. No slogan could answer what Jasmine had just demanded. The entire chamber leaned forward in unison, as if gravity itself had pulled them into the vacuum Karoline had created. 10 seconds, 11, 12. On CNN, anchors whisper, we are witnessing history. On Fox, the screen froze on Karoline's face, panic creeping in around her smile. The control room producers flashed graphics, unsure whether to cut away or let the moment breathe. Every network chose the same path. Stay with the silence. The stillness was louder than any speech. 20 seconds, 21, 22. Hashtags erupted across social media like fireworks. Hashtag show the records. Hashtag MAFA or mask. Hashtag for 7 seconds. On TikTok, the silence was clipped and looped, users layering captions like the sound of lies collapsing. On Twitter, commentators posted stopwatches counting in real time. The country wasn't just watching Karoline, America was timing her. 30 seconds, 31, 32. A bead of sweat slipped down her temple, caught in the unforgiving glare of the chamber lights. GOP allies shifted uneasily behind her, some glancing toward the exits, others burying their faces in their phones. Even her defenders knew this wasn't a pause, it was a collapse. 40 seconds, 41, 42. Jasmine sat perfectly still, as locked on Karoline, not a trace of pity softening her stare. The silence wasn't empty, it was filled with Jasmine's presence, her quiet defiance radiating stronger than 1,000 words. She didn't need to press further, she knew the nation was already doing the work for her. 47 seconds, the clock hit its mark. Karoline finally blinked, fumbled with her microphone, and whispered, the American people don't need, but the damage was already irreparable. The story had been written not in ink, not in sound, but in silence. The chamber erupted not with applause, but with no's, reporters firing questions, cameras flashing, citizens in the gallery shouting, answer her. The stillness that had suffocated the room only moments earlier now detonated into chaos. Jasmine didn't speak again, she didn't need to. Her question hung in the air, heavier than any answer Karoline could ever give. Across America, viewers sat stunned in their homes, replaying the moment over and over. captivated not by words, but by the absence of them. Silence had become the loudest confession. And as the dust settled, one thought cut through the nation's mind like a whisper carried on a storm. Will Karoline Leavitt recover, or will she crumble completely under the merciless spotlight? Karoline steadied herself, gripping the binder as if it could still shield her from the damage of those 47 silent seconds. Her voice returned, louder now, almost desperate to reclaim control. "Let me remind you," she said, flipping to a marked page, "this president is not only leading our nation, he is leading a fitness crusade." She read aloud from an article published by AMAC, her cadence rising like a sermon. Donald J. Trump is restoring discipline, strength, and health to a nation in decline. He embodies stamina, focus, and vitality, qualities America needs more than ever. The words felt like theater, every syllable polished for effect, but the chamber listened, half in disbelief, half in morbid fascination. Karoline pressed on, determined to drown the memory of her silence. "This administration has launched the Pete and Bobby Challenge," she declared, her eyes sweeping across the cameras. 50 pull-ups, 100 push-ups, 10 minutes. A test not of politics, but of perseverance, a test for the soul of America. The audience stirred, gasps mixed with scoffs. Some reporters scribbled furiously, others simply stared, baffled that a defense of presidential health had morphed into a spectacle of muscle contests. In the gallery, one veteran muttered, "I fought into wars, and they want to judge leadership on push-ups." His voice, though low, carried enough weight that the microphones picked it up. Twitter seized it within seconds. Karoline gestured toward the screen, where stage footage appeared. Soldiers training, students running laps, families jogging together in red hats stamped motto. "This is more than politics," she insisted. "This is about saving a generation from weakness, building a nation of fighters. Our president has lit the torch of strength, and America will follow." Her words were heavy, grandiose, almost messianic. The performance had shifted from press briefing to propaganda rally, and everyone could feel it. But Jasmine Crockett did not move. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded, her gaze fixed. She knew the audience both in the chamber and across the nation wasn't just hearing Karoline's words. They were weighing them against the images still burned into their minds. Bruised skin, swollen joints, days of absence unexplained. Jasmine understood that timing was everything. To strike too soon would look like interruption. To wait would let the hollowness of Karoline's spectacle reveal itself. The networks cut to split screens again. On one side, Karoline spoke passionately about a nation doing pull-ups. On the other, images of Trump's faltering steps replayed, in a silent loop. The contradiction was devastating. Viewers at home whispered to themselves, "How can a man who can't climb stairs lead a fitness crusade?" Karoline slammed her binder shut and leaned toward the microphone. "This is leadership," she declared, her voice trembling on the edge of defiance and exhaustion. But the question hung in the air, sharper than her proclamation, echoing across the chamber, spreading into every living room, diner, and screen in America. Is this leadership or just a distraction? The chamber was still buzzing from Karoline's theatrics when Jasmine finally leaned forward, her voice cutting through the noise like steel through glass. "You call this leadership?" she began, her tone deceptively calm. Then she delivered the strike. "Let me remind you all, Donald Trump once said, exercise drains the body's battery. That's your fitness hero." The room cracked. A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the gallery, half disbelief, half release, as though the crowd had been waiting for someone to puncture the absurdity. The cameras wasted no time zooming in on GOP faces now contorted with scowls, jaws clenched, eyes flashing. Some shifted in their seats, whispering to each other, as if begging for a quick rebuttal, but none came. The laughter kept rolling, not joyous but sharp, like a blade slicing through the carefully crafted illusion. Jasmine let the moment hang before pressing further, a crusade of pull-ups and push-ups. "That's not transparency, that's a carnival trick. You don't measure the health of a president by push-ups. You measure it by honesty. And this White House has failed the simplest test of all, telling the truth." The words reverberated against the marble walls, striking harder than any statistic. Karoline shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening around her binder, her face struggling to maintain composure under the relentless spotlight. The networks cut to split screens again, Karoline's rigid stare on one side, Jasmine's unwavering calm on the other. And across the bottom of the screen, chirons blazed, Crockett calls out fitness carnival trick. Press sec, cornered. The gallery erupted in murmurs. A young veteran leaned forward, muttering, "She's right, truth is the real test." A grandmother in the front row clutched her pearls, whispering to her neighbor, "I haven't seen someone this fearless in years." Reporters scribbled furiously, knowing they were witnessing a moment destined to define the news cycle, maybe even the year. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every syllable carried the weight of conviction, the edge of a scalpel. Fitness is not a distraction from reality. Fitness is the courage to face it. If the president is strong, then show us the record. If he is fit, then prove it with facts, not staged push-up contests. Her words landed one by one, like hammers pounding a coffin shut. Karoline tried to interject, her voice trembling. The American people want inspiration. But Jasmine sliced through her interruption. No, the American people want truth. Because without truth, there is no strength. Without truth, there is no fitness. Without truth, there is no America. The last word rang in the chamber like a gavel. The silence that followed was heavier than applause, charged with both dread and awe. Every viewer at home felt it, the sense that something sacred had just been spoken, something no spin doctor could erase. And as the cameras caught Jasmine's steady gaze, a single question crystallized, hanging over the nation like a storm cloud ready to break. Can humor cut sharper than anger in exposing hypocrisy? The smile on Karoline Leavitt's face had evaporated. Her voice rose, brittle yet venomous, as she snapped into the microphone. This is nothing more than political theater. Representative Crockett is a political opportunist, exploiting rumors and images to smear a president who has given his life to this country. Her words cracked like a whip, sharp and defensive, but the strain in her tone betrayed the fear underneath. Gasps erupted from the gallery, reporters' pens scratched furiously. The insult hung in the chamber like smoke, thick and acrid, daring Jasmine to flinch. But Jasmine didn't blink. She straightened in her chair, her presence commanding the room before she even spoke. When she finally did, her words came measured, steady, and unyielding. Truth doesn't weaken a nation, lies do. The line detonated. The crowd shifted, as though the floor itself had trembled. A murmur of approval rippled through the gallery, clashing against the furious whispers from Karoline's allies. The networks instantly seized the moment, replaying Jasmine's words in bold captions across the bottom of the screen. Crockett, truth makes America strong. Karoline leaned forward, her eyes narrowing into slits, her voice dripping with contempt. Do you think Americans care about your sanctimonious lectures? They want results, not your grandstanding. But Jasmine struck back before the words had even settled. Results without truth are illusions, and illusions cannot govern a free people. The room was alive now, a battlefield of ideals. One side clung to slogans and fury, the other to facts and unshakable resolve. Every viewer at home could feel the tension tightening, the stakes rising beyond it. Hearing it was about the soul of the country itself. Karoline's voice cracked as she pressed on. You want to tear down a leader who inspires millions. Jasmine's reply came like a thunderclap. No, I want to protect millions from being deceived by a leader who hides from them. Inspiration without honesty is manipulation, and America deserves better. Cameras zoomed close on Karoline's face, sweat beading along her temple, lips tightening, jaw locked. Then they cut to Jasmine, calm, fierce, a pillar of composure. The contrast was undeniable. On social media, the clips exploded, side-by-side comparisons flooding timelines with captions like strength versus spin. The chamber itself seemed to tilt, the air heavier, as if everyone present understood this wasn't just an exchange of insults. It was a collision of worldviews, one rooted in loyalty to power, the other anchored in loyalty to truth. And as Jasmine's words echoed again in the stillness, even her opponents could not entirely mask the weight of their sting. The silence that followed was fragile, like glass stretched thin. The crowd held its breath, the networks leaned into the pause, and the nation waited for what would come next. The insult had been thrown, but the counterstrike had landed harder. And the question lingered, sharp and unrelenting. When insults fly, can facts still stand tallest? The tension in the chamber was already knife-sharp when Jim Jordan suddenly lunged into the spotlight. He shot up from his seat, jabbing his finger across the aisle, his voice booming with the fury of a man trying to drown out the truth. This is a witch hunt, he roared, veins rising on his neck, the microphone crackling under the strain of his volume. Representative Crockett isn't after transparency, she's after blood. She's weaponizing rumors to tear down a president who sacrificed everything for this country. The gallery erupted in nosegasts, shouts, the rustle of reporters scrambling to capture every word. Jordan wasn't just interrupting, he was charging at Jasmine with all the aggression of the corner animal. The camera zoomed in, catching his face twisted with rage, his words spitting out like bullets. The GOP bench thumped in support, trying to turn the hearing into a spectacle of outrage, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She turned her gaze on Jordan, her voice calm yet commanding, her tone sharpened by authority. "You're out of order, Congressman." She didn't shout, she didn't match his fury. Her words were controlled, precise, like a scalpel cutting through chaos. Jordan tried to push back, slamming his palm against the desk, his voice rising higher. "Out of order. The only thing out of order here is this circus you're running. You're smearing the president with doctored photos and cheap theatrics." His rant seemed endless, each sentence more desperate than the last. But Jasmine raised her hand slowly, deliberately, and the gavel of the chair hammered down. "Representative Jordan," Jasmine continued, her voice carrying over the din, "this chamber is not a stage for your tantrums. You don't get to shout down accountability. You don't get to bully the truth into silence." The words landed heavy, each one steady, deliberate, undeniable. For a moment, the room froze. The cameras cut to Jordan, his face red, his chest heaving, then back to Jasmine, who hadn't moved an inch. The contrast was stark, rage flailing against resolve, obstruction colliding with courage. And in that silence, something extraordinary happened. Applause. It began faintly, a few claps from the gallery, then swelled until it filled the chamber. Citizens, activists, even a few stunned staffers joined in, the sound rising like a wave that Jordan couldn't stop. Jordan's jaw tightened, his glare darting around the room as if searching for an ally, but none came. Even some of his colleagues shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to be tethered to the spectacle he had just unleashed. The applause wasn't just noise, it was judgment, a verdict on his tactics, and a recognition of Jasmine's pose under fire. The camera held on Jasmine, her face lit by the glow of resolve, her words echoing long after they left her lips. She had stood firm against the storm, and in doing so, she had shown the nation the difference between noise and truth. And as the cheers subsided, one question lingered, vibrating through the air, cutting into every living room across America. What happens when courage collides with obstruction? The chamber had barely caught its breath from Jordan's outburst when another voice slashed through the nose, shrill, relentless, unmistakable. Marjorie Taylor Greene rose from her seat, her fists clenched, her voice rattling the microphone. "This is nothing but a Democrat circus," she shouted, her words echoing like broken glass across marble walls. "A sham, a sideshow, a disgrace to this institution." The gallery erupted again, some gasping, others groaning, and a few shouting back in fury. Reporters scrambled to capture the firestorm, their lenses swinging from Greene's contorted face to Jasmine's calm figure. Greene's rant gathered speed, her voice climbing higher with every accusation. "You don't care about the truth, you don't care about America. You just want to humiliate a great man and destroy this country for your own gain." The volume was suffocating, a wall of noise threatening to drown reason itself. But Jasmine didn't rise to meet it with rage. She simply turned, her eyes locking on Greene like a predator fixing its gaze. When she spoke, her voice was low but lethal, slicing clean through the cacophony. "The circus," she said, pausing just long enough for silence to fall, "is pretending sickness doesn't exist." The words detonated like dynamite. The chamber fell still for a split second, then erupted again, this time in roars, applause, and cries of disbelief. Greene's face flushed crimson as she banged the desk in front of her, her voice cracking. "Lies, all lies," she shrieked, but the power of her interruption had already collapsed under Jasmine's razor-sharp retort. Networks cut instantly to split screens, Greene screaming, veins straining in her neck. Jasmine cool, posed, unshaken. On social media, clips of the exchange exploded within seconds. Captions appeared, Crockett versus Greene, circus called out, and truth versus chaos. Hashtags like #Crockett cuts deep and #Greene meltdown surged into trending charts. Jasmine leaned forward now, her words deliberate, amplified by the silence Greene had accidentally gifted her. You call this hearing a circus? No, Congresswoman. The circus is built on distraction. The circus is built on denial. The circus is pretending that bruises are makeup, that silence is strength, and that the American people don't deserve the truth. Her voice was steady, but each word hit with the weight of a hammer. Green opened her mouth again, but the gallery wasn't on her side anymore. Citizens in the audience jeered, shouting, "Show the records." Their chants rose louder, drowning out Green's sputtering protests. The chair banged the gavel, but the energy in the room had already shifted, pulled inexorably toward Jasmine. Cameras zoomed on her face. Unflinching, resolute, fierce. The image would be replayed for days. Jasmine standing tall in calm defiance, Green unraveling beside her. It was more than politics, it was symbolism. One represented chaos, the other composure. And America, watching from millions of screens, knew which one looked like leadership. The nose faded, the cameras rolled, and the nation held its breath. And a single question, sharper than any insult, lingered like a storm cloud overhead. How do you fight chaos without losing composure? For a moment, the chamber quivered with silence, then it cracked wide open. From the public gallery above, one voice shouted, "Show the records." Another joined, then 10, then dozens. Within seconds, the gallery thundered as if the rafters themselves were shaking, the chant reverberating like a drumline of defiance. "Show the records, show the records." The sound was deafening, drowning out the chair's gavel, overwhelming Green's sputtering protests. Cameras swung upward, capturing the sea of raised fists and furious faces. These weren't just spectators, they were veterans, nurses, students, seniors, ordinary Americans who had packed the gallery with questions that had gone unanswered for too long. Their anger poured down like a storm, unstoppable, uncontainable. On MSNBC, anchors leaned forward in awe. "This is unprecedented," whispered Rachel Maddow, her eyes wide. The public gallery as erupted into direct demand. "This isn't just politics anymore. This is people power." On Fox, the panel scrambled, their voices colliding as they tried to frame the eruption as stage theatrics, but the raw footage betrayed them. The split screen told the real story. On the left, Jasmine Crockett, calm and unshaken. On the right, the people of America chanting in unison, a chorus that no spin doctor could mute. Reporters tweeted furiously, their feeds lighting up like fireworks. "Never seen anything like this. Congress chamber drowned in chants. The people have spoken." Hashtag show the records trending #1 in less than 3 minutes. Clips hit TikTok instantly, looping the chant under bold captions. 47 seconds of silence gives one nation's demand. Karoline Leavitt's face was pale, her knuckles white as she gripped her binder. She tried to lean toward the microphone, but the roar smothered her words. Even members of her own party looked uneasy, their eyes darting nervously to the crowd above, aware that this spectacle was spiraling out of their control. Jasmine waited, hands folded, letting the storm rage. She didn't need to shout over it. She knew the chant spoke louder than anything she could say. The camera zoomed in on her expression, calm, resolute, her eyes burning with quiet satisfaction. For a fleeting second, she glanced up at the gallery, and the people roared even louder, as though their voices had just found their champion. The chair hammered the gavel again and again, but order refused to return. America was no longer watching passively, it was participating. Live, in real time, breaking the walls between spectator and actor. This wasn't Jasmine against Karoline anymore, it was the people against denial. The chamber shook, the chants thundered, and the networks carried it into every living room in the nation. Families at home joined in, whispering the words under their breath as though rehearsing for the fight outside these walls. The atmosphere had transformed, the line between government and governed blurred into one primal chorus. And as the chant grew, unstoppable and relentless, the question no longer belonged to Jasmine or even Congress, it belonged to the country itself. Can the pressure of the people force the powerful to finally speak the truth? The chants still rattled the chamber when Jasmine Crockett rose to her feet. She didn't raise her hand for silence, she didn't have to. The gallery, the reporters, even the members of Congress leaned in as if pulled by gravity. With a single tap on her console, the screens behind her blazed to life, bathing the room in a cold white glow. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jasmine said, her tone steady, deliberate, "this is not rumor. This is not spin. This is medical fact." The first slide appeared, A close-up image annotated by vascular specialists. Red arrows circled the discoloration along Trump's hand, the swelling around his ankle. Next to it, a bold heading: chronic venous insufficiency common symptoms. Beneath it, bullet points: leg swelling, pain, visible bruising, risk of clotting. The gallery gasped, the sound sharp and collective. Another slide followed, this one devastating in its simplicity. On one side, a chart of past presidential health disclosures: Kennedy, Reagan, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden dates and doctors' statements listed in neat rows. On the other side, under Trump's name, a blank space. The emptiness was louder than any statistic. The GOP bench shifted visibly. One aide leaned over to whisper frantically in a congressman's ear, but the cameras caught it all. Another member adjusted his tie 3 times in 30 seconds, sweat dotting his forehead. The illusion of composure was collapsing in real time. Jasmine pressed forward, her voice now rising, measured but cutting. Every modern president has faced the American people with transparency. They understood that leadership demands trust, and trust demands honesty. Yet here we are, in the dark, fed slogans instead of truth, stage tricks instead of records. Is this what we call strength, or is it fear dressed in red, white, and blue? The screen shifted again. A timeline rolled across, showing every day Trump had vanished from public view in the past year. Each date flashed with headlines: no public appearances, events canceled, golf club visit private only. The pattern was undeniable. The air in the chamber grew heavier, every second a tightening noose around the White House narrative. Networks cut to split screens. On MSNBC, Rachel Maddow's hand covered her mouth, eyes wide. On Fox, the anchors stumbled, one muttering, "We haven't verified this," while the images burned across the screen anyway. Social media detonated. Hashtag medical truth, hashtag blank record, hashtag Crockett evidence. Clips of the chart comparing Trump's blank disclosure against decades of tradition spread like wildfire. Karoline Leavitt's face was a mask of stone, but her hands betrayed her, clutching the binder so tightly her knuckles turned white. She tried to look unshaken, but the screen behind her screamed louder than she ever could. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She let the silence in the room amplify her words. Every second of denial chips away at the trust between leader and people. Every slogan hides a bruise, every distraction hides a blank page. But the truth, she paused, eyes locked on Karoline, the truth doesn't hide. The truth waits. The chamber was silent, breathless, trembling with the weight of the evidence. And across America, one question seared itself into the mind of every viewer: how long can silence hide behind slogans? Karoline Leavitt gripped the microphone with trembling hands, her voice faltering as the medical slides behind her glared like neon indictments. This is not about rumors or bruises," she stammered, forcing her tone upward. "This is about national pride, about showing the world that America is strong, that our leader embodies resilience." Her words tumbled out unevenly, the confidence that once carried her reduced to a shaky echo. The chamber didn't buy it. The gallery murmured with disbelief. The reporters glanced at one another, pens paused midair. The camera caught the sweat glistening along her hairline, her eyes darting as though searching for an escape route. For a fleeting moment, it wasn't the press secretary of the United States speaking, it was a cornered figure trying to patch a collapsing narrative. Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She leaned forward, her voice calm, deliberate, devastating. "National pride is not built on spin. Ms. Leavitt, national pride is built on truth. And truth is not makeup brushed over bruises." The line hit like a hammer, gasps cut through the chamber, followed by the crackle of camera shutters capturing Karoline's stricken face in merciless detail. Within minutes, social media detonated. Memes flooded timelines, split images of Trump's bruised hand on one side, a powder compact on the other, labeled makeup versus medical. TikTok users looped Jasmine's line over and over, the word sensing with slow-motion zooms of Karoline's paling expression. Hashtags spiked into the global top 10. Hashtag mask vs truth. Hashtag bruises don't lie. Hashtag cornered Leavitt. Karoline tried to recover, her voice rising in desperation. The American people don't need lectures from politicians who thrive on division. They want to see strength, not cynicism. But the words landed flat, drowned beneath the weight of the evidence on the screens. Even the GOP bench behind her shifted uncomfortably, their eyes betraying unease. One congressman rubbed his forehead, another sank lower in his chair, as though wishing the floor would swallow him whole. Jasmine pressed her advantage, her tone unrelenting but never cruel. Strength is not denial. Strength is not parading the people through stage contests while hiding the most basic truths. Strength is the courage to show the wrecker and let the people decide. Her voice grew sharper, the cadence rising like a prosecuting attorney closing in for the final blow. Karoline's lips parted, but nothing came. The silence stretched again, though shorter this time, filled not with shock but with recognition. Everyone in the chamber, everyone watching across America, could see it. The mask had slipped. What remained wasn't strength, wasn't confidence, it was raw vulnerability, exposed for all to witness. The networks replayed the exchange in split screen. Jasmine, steady as a rock, Karoline, wilting under the light. Commentators spoke in hushed tones, aware that the moment was bigger than politics, it was the unmasking of an illusion. And as the camera lingered on Karoline's defeated stare, Jasmine's words still ringing in the air, the nation asked itself the only question that mattered. When the mask slips, what remains? The room vibrated with tension as Karoline Leavitt opened her mouth to answer, but the words betrayed her. They caught in her throat, tangled and broken, until nothing came out but a faint rasp. Her eyes darted across the chamber toward Jasmine, toward the cameras, toward the gallery above, but there was nowhere left to run. The silence returned, heavier now, merciless in its weight. 1 second, 2, 3. Beads of sweat rolled down her temple, catching in the glare of the spotlights. The binder in front of her lay untouched, to carefully prepared talking points suddenly worthless. Her fingers trembled as she tried to flip a page, then stop, realizing it would only expose her desperation. 10 seconds, 11, 12. The camera zoomed tighter, unforgiving, broadcasting every twitch of her jaw to millions of viewers. On the GOP bench, lawmakers averted their eyes, staring down at their shoes, shuffling papers that didn't need shuffling. One crossed his arms tightly, another fiddled with his pen, all of them desperate to avoid the gaze of history. 20 seconds, 21, 22. On MSNBC, Rachel Maddow whispered, "She's frozen again, this is extraordinary." On CNN, Anderson Cooper simply shook his head. Fox News struggled to fill the silence, anchors stumbling with phrases like "this is unusual" as producers frantically cut between angles. But the footage spoke louder than any spin. The silence was the story. 30 seconds, 31, 32. Social media exploded once more. Hashtags burned into the trending charts. Hashtag freeze2, hashtag Leavitt locked, hashtag echo of silence. Memes flooded in by the second split screens of Karoline frozen beside statues, clocks ticking mercilessly, captions reading, "America waits." She hesitates. TikTok edits loop the silence with thundering heartbeat soundtracks, turning her collapse into a cultural moment no one could escape. 40 seconds, 41, 42. The gallery above leaned forward, their chants momentarily hushed as if savoring the unraveling. Phones lifted, capturing every agonizing second. The sound of a cough from the back row echoed, like a gunshot, the silence so absolute it magnified every breath, every whisper, every drop of sweat sliding down Karoline's skin. 47 seconds, 48, 49. Jasmine remained motionless, her face lit with the composure of someone who understood she didn't need to speak. Her opponent was destroying herself. The contrast was brutal. One woman steady as steel, the other unraveling before the eyes of a nation. Finally, Karoline exhaled a shuddering breath and muttered something indistinct, a string of half-formed words about pride and strength. But it was too late. The pause had already carved itself into the collective memory. The chamber had witnessed not just hesitation, it had witnessed collapse. The noise returned in a tidal wave, reporters shouting questions, the gallery roaring, cameras flashing so brightly the room felt like a battlefield lit by gunfire. The silence was gone, but its echo remained, ringing louder than any speech could. And as the networks replayed the moment again and again, the nation leaned forward, breathless, asking the only question that mattered now. Is this the moment America finally starts demanding answers? The silence had gutted her, but Karoline Leavitt refused to let it end her. Her face flushed crimson, eyes blazing, she suddenly slammed both hands onto the desk, the microphone rattling with the force. "Enough," she screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of fury. This isn't about bruises, or records, or your political games. You want to weaken America. You want to tear down a president who has given everything to keep this country strong. The outburst ricocheted off the chamber walls like a cannon blast. The gallery gasped, startled at the sudden eruption. Reporters jolted upright, pens scratching in a frenzy, their eyes darting between Jasmine's calm composure and Karoline's unraveling rage. The camera zoomed in mercilessly on her reddened face, sweat glistening under the spotlights, every word dripping with desperation disguised as patriotism. Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her voice cutting through the storm with the precision of a blade. "Weak," she said coldly, "is hiding behind propaganda." The chamber erupted again, gasps, applause, jeers. The contrast between Karoline's fury and Jasmine's icy clarity was so stark that even the network struggled to keep up. On MSNBC, anchors whispered in awe. She dismantled her in a single sentence. On Fox, voices overlapped, scrambling to reframe the moment. Karoline pounded forward, voice rising into a shriek. "You don't care about America's strength, Congresswoman. You care about headlines, about destroying a man who inspires millions." Her words spilled out faster, raw, less coherent, her fury consuming any semblance of strategy. She jabbed her finger across the aisle, her gestures wild, almost frantic. Jasmine sat still, her face calm but her eyes burning. She let the tirade run its course, then spoke with the weight of a hammer blow. "Inspiration without truth is manipulation, and manipulation makes a nation fragile. The American people don't need staged heroics, they need honesty." The cameras split the screen. Jasmine posed, her words crisp and lethal. Karoline raging, her mouth twisted in anger, her voice cracking under strain. On social media, the clip spread instantly. Hashtags surged. Hashtag weak is lies. Hashtag fury vs facts. Hashtag Crockett cuts deep. Memes contrasted Jasmine's calm gaze with Karoline's red-faced shouting, captions reading, "One leads, one loses control." The hearing spiraled into chaos, anchors narrating live as if covering a war zone. "We are watching a meltdown in real time," one announced. The gallery roared, some booing, others applauding, the chance of show the records. Threatening to drown everything else, staffers huddled. GOP allies avoid eye contact, the entire chamber trembling under the spectacle. Jasmine raised her hand, her voice unwavering even against the chaos. "Strength isn't measured by how loud you can shout. Strength is measured by how much truth you can carry." Her words cut through the chamber like thunder splitting the sky. Karoline froze for a split second, caught between rage and collapse, her chest heaving as the gavel hammered for order. And as the uproar swelled, filling the chamber with a storm of sound, the nation asked itself a question more dangerous than any accusation. When anger replaces answers, who really wins? The echoes of Karoline's shouting still hung in the air when Jasmine Crockett rose slowly, the calm after the storm, though her eyes burned with fire. She didn't match rage with rage, she reached for something heavier, something undeniable. Her voice steadied, cutting across the nose. "Let's talk about facts." The screen behind her flickered to a new slide, this time stark numbers in red and black. 42% of Americans live with obesity, Jasmine declared. Heart disease remains the #1 killer, taking more than 600,000 lives every year. And among seniors, nearly 80% face at least one chronic health condition. She paused, her words slicing into the silence, each statistic hitting like a hammer on steel. The gallery quieted, even Green's voice fell silent. Reporters scribbled frantically, recognizing this wasn't political theater anymore, this was the weight of reality itself. Jasmine let the silence linger before she spoke again. "The President of the United States is 79 years old. 79, the most stressful job on earth, is being entrusted to a man nearly 8 decades into life. And yet, we are told not to ask questions, not to expect answers, not to demand proof." The screen split again, side by side. On one half, the CDC data on senior health risks. On the other, the blank disclosure line under Trump's name. The contrast was brutal, undeniable. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate before cutting back to Jasmine's face, her stare unflinching. "This isn't just about fitness contests or slogans," she continued, her voice now rising with righteous momentum. "This is about national security. If the commander-in-chief collapses, America doesn't just lose a leader, America becomes vulnerable. Vulnerable to crises, vulnerable to enemies who watch every weakness, every hesitation. And hiding the truth does not protect this nation, it endangers it. Karoline shifted uneasily, gripping her binder like a lifeline. Her allies looked away, the weight of the facts crushing louder than any slogan could fight. The gallery murmured again, a low rumble of unease, citizens realizing the stakes stretched far beyond partisan battles. Jasmine drove forward, her words sharp as blades. When a leader hides the truth about their health, they gamble not just with their own body but with the body of this nation. They gamble with every soldier on the field, every worker in the factory, every child in the classroom. The American people are not pawns in a propaganda game. We deserve honesty, we deserve transparency. Because without it, we are blind, and blindness is weakness. The networks broadcast the line in real time. Karoline blazing, Crockett, hiding health equals national security risk. Social media lit up. Hashtag surging. Hashtag truth is strength. Hashtag health is security. Hashtag Crockett numbers. The memes shifted now, no longer just mocking Karoline, they framed Jasmine as the sentinel of truth, the voice piercing through noise. Jasmine's final words of the exchange landed like thunder. Strength is not measured by how many push-ups a man can do for the cameras. Strength is measured by how much truth a nation can carry on its shoulders. The chamber sat frozen, shaken not by shouting but by the cold finality of evidence. And across America, millions asked the same searing question: is transparency the ultimate test of strength? Outside the Capitol, the air pulsed with a new electricity. What began as murmurs of frustration had erupted into a storm of defiance. Protesters surged against the barricades, their signs raised high under the glare of news cameras. Health plus truth equals strength. The chant rolled through the crowd like a battle hymn, pounding against the marble walls of Congress, refusing to be ignored. Across the steps, a group of young men dropped to the ground, attempting the so-called Pete and Bobby challenge: 50 pull-ups, 100 push-ups, but they weren't just performing for fitness, they were holding placards scrawled with fury. We don't need stunts. We need records. Their grunts of exertion carried over the chants, a living mockery of the White House's staged propaganda. Each failed rep, each collapse onto the pavement, drove the point home. Gimmicks could not replace transparency. The crowd grew louder, more diverse with every minute. Nurses in scrubs, veterans with medals pinned to their jackets, seniors leaning on canes, but shouting until their voices cracked. A teacher held up a sign above her head: "My students deserve a leader who tells the truth." The chant swelled again, shaking the barricades. Health plus truth equals strength. Health plus truth equals strength. Networks scrambled to cover the chaos outside, as furiously as they were covering the hearing inside. MSNBC cut live to the protest, cameras sweeping across faces contorted with rage and hope. "This isn't a fringe," one anchor whispered. "This is a movement." On Fox, the footage rolled reluctantly, their anchors struggling to dismiss what the images made undeniable. The people were rising, and they were rising together. Social media was ablaze. Live streams from phones inside the crowd drew hundreds of thousands of viewers, then millions. Hashtags surged globally. Hashtag truth is strength. Hashtag records now. Hashtag people power. Clips of protesters collapsing mid-push-up, gasping but raising their placards defiantly, spread like wildfire, symbolizing both the absurdity of the government stunt and the resilience of ordinary citizens. The despair that had clouded the nation only days earlier was transmuting into something harder, sharper mobilization. What was once whispered suspicion was now shouted demand. The people weren't waiting for permission. They were claiming the stage. The barricades groaned as protesters pressed closer, the chants turning into a roar that made even the police hesitate. Inside the chamber, the echoes seeped through the walls. Everyone could hear it, the living heartbeat of the country pounding against the gates of power. Jasmine glanced briefly toward the sound, and for the first time that day, a faint smile flickered across her face. She didn't need to speak. The people were speaking for her. Reporters described it with words reserved for history. "The steps of the Capitol have become an arena of truth," one wrote. "This is not a protest, it is an uprising of conscience." And as the chants thundered higher, rattling windows and shaking the city, one question seared itself across every screen, every living room, every restless heart: Can ordinary citizens truly change the course of history? The roar from outside still shook the Capitol walls, and Jasmine Crockett turned her gaze toward the two men sitting stiffly at the witness table: Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Their faces, once brimming with pride over the Pete and Bobby challenge, now looked drained under the relentless glare of the cameras. Jasmine rose, her voice calm but sharpened to a lethal edge. "Gentlemen, let's end the theatrics. Who validated MAFA scientifically? Who confirmed that this so-called crusade meets even the most basic medical standards?" The chamber froze. Kennedy's eyes darted to his notes, flipping pages that contained no answers. Hegseth cleared his throat, shifting in his seat, his military posture beginning to crack. "Well, Congresswoman," Kennedy stammered, It was reviewed internally, of course. Our advisors." His voice trailed off, searching for an exit that didn't exist. Jasmine cut in, merciless. "Internally, no independent review. No medical board, no peer-reviewed validation." Her words were bullets, each one striking harder than the last. The gallery gasped, and the murmurs grew louder, rippling through the chamber like a wave gathering strength. Hegseth tried to intervene, his voice straining against the silence closing in around him. "Congresswoman, this is about motivating the American people, about giving them a challenge that inspires discipline." But Jasmine's eyes flashed as she leaned in closer. "Inspiration without science is propaganda. And propaganda doesn't make a nation healthy, it makes it blind." The chamber erupted, reporters scribbling furiously, networks cutting to live reaction shots of GOP members staring down at their desks, unable to meet the cameras. The outside chants of health plus truth equals strength bled into the chamber, merging with the growing unease inside. Jasmine didn't relent. She let the silence stretch, then delivered the final strike. "So let me be clear. The entire fitness program you've paraded across this nation was launched without a single independent medical board review. That means every push-up, every pull-up, every slogan was built on nothing but political theater." Kennedy and Hegseth shifted uncomfortably, their silence louder than any denial. The chamber's murmur swelled into open outrage. And as cameras zoomed in on Jasmine's unwavering stare, one question cut across the nation, searing itself into the conscience of millions: can flashy challenges ever replace medical truth? The murmurs from Kennedy and Hegseth's fumbling had barely settled when Jasmine Crockett struck again. She tapped her console, and the screen behind her shifted from medical charts to something far more explosive, a scanned memo stamped confidential. The room froze as bold black letters filled the screen. "Focus on optics, not medical facts." Gasps ripped through the chamber like a shockwave. Reporters shot to their feet, cameras flashing in a frenzy, the gallery roaring with disbelief. MSNBC anchors nearly stumbled over their words. "Oh my God. She's showing an internal White House directive," on Fox. Stunned silence lingered before one anchor muttered, We need confirmation of authenticity." But the words were already burned into every screen. Undeniable, unforgettable. Karoline Leavitt shot up from her seat, her voice raw, shrieking over the chaos. "This is a betrayal. You're betraying America." She slammed her fist against the table, eyes wild, face red with fury. Her scream echoed through the chamber. Desperate, furious, unraveling. Jasmine didn't flinch. She turned slowly, her voice low but sharper than steel. Raveling. Jasmine didn't flinch. She turned slowly, her voice low but sharper than steel. "No. I'm saving it." The line landed like a thunderclap, cutting through the noise, freezing the chamber in awe. The contrast was brutal. Leavitt raging like a storm, Jasmine steady as a lighthouse in the darkness. The gallery erupted, chants colliding with cheers. "Show the records. Truth, not optics." The chairs gaveled banged furiously, but order was gone. Reporters tweeted in real time, their feeds flooding with screenshots of the memo. "Confidential, optics over facts, Crockett drops bombshell live, #surge, #memo leak, #optics vs truth, #Crockett saves America. Leavitt tried again, her voice cracking. "You're handing our enemies ammunition." But Jasmine's response was merciless, every word deliberate. "Our enemies don't need ammunition. They only need us to lie to ourselves. The real betrayal is pretending weakness is strength, that propaganda is policy, that makeup is medicine, that is betrayal, truth is protection." The networks cut between Jasmine's resolute glare and the words glowing on the screen. Focus on optics, not medical facts. The chamber had been transformed into a courtroom, the evidence damning, the verdict already forming in the minds of millions. The gavel hammered again, but the noise outside grew louder, seeping into the chamber the roar of the people who now had proof that their suspicions had been real all along. And as the cameras zoomed in on Jasmine, standing like an immovable force while her opponents crumbled around her, one question thundered across the nation: when lies collapse, what rises? The leaked memo still glowed on the screen, its words burning into the chamber like a scar that couldn't be erased. Karoline Leavitt clutched the edge of the desk, her knuckles bone white, her mouth opening and closing but no sound emerging. She tried to summon a rebuttal, but the words collapsed in her throat, fragments of half-sentences dying before they reached the microphone. Her eyes darted wildly, first toward Kennedy, then Hegseth, then the GOP bench, but no one moved to save her. The cameras locked in, broadcasting every second of her unraveling. Split-screen graphics filled televisions nationwide. On one side, Karoline frozen, sweat streaking down her temple, pupils flickering like a trapped animal. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, seated calm and still, her gaze fixed, a portrait of composure. The contrast was brutal, cinematic, unforgettable. The gallery knew it. They leaned forward, breaths held, as if watching a fighter take the final blow in the ring. One journalist whispered into his hot mic, "She's breaking. She can't answer." MSNBC anchors stared wide-eyed. Even Fox struggled to find words. Social media declared the verdict in real time. Crockett wins. The hashtag surged to #1 worldwide within minutes. Memes flashing across feeds, Karoline's frozen face beside captions like "Silence is the loudest confession." 30 seconds passed, then 40. The silence wasn't just a pause, it was surrender. Her lips quivered, her chest heaved, but nothing coherent escaped. Every second carved deeper into her credibility, every second widening the gulf between fury and facts. Jasmine didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was dominance. The cameras lingered on her face, her steady posture, her unshaken eyes. She understood what everyone else in the chamber already knew. Karoline had nothing left. The fight was no longer equal, the scales had tipped. The gavel struck again, but the sound barely registered above the roar outside, where protesters' chants of "health plus truth equals strength" seemed to synchronize perfectly with Karoline's silence. It was as if the nation itself had spoken louder than she ever could. And as the freeze stretched into its final, unbearable moments, one question pressed down on the Capitol, echoed across newsrooms, and burned into every living room screen. Has the tide already turned, or is the fight just beginning? The echoes of Karoline's second freeze still hung in the air, and the chair of the committee leaned into the microphone, his gavel striking once, twice, a sharp crack that demanded silence. The room stilled, every eye fixed on the dais. His voice carried the gravity of history. This committee will not accept slogans, optics, or silence as substitutes for truth. Therefore, we are issuing a directive. Within 48 hours, the White House must provide an independent medical summary of the president's health. Verify, transparent, public. The words detonated like thunder. Gasps tore through the chamber. Reporters shot to their feet, flooding their feeds with the breaking headline: "Committee orders Trump health disclosure 48-hour deadline." In the gallery, the roar of approval was deafening. Chants of "show the records" surging with renewed fury. On the GOP bench, faces tightened, jaws clenched. Some muttered objections under their breath, but the cameras caught the truth: resignation. Even Trump's staunchest defenders could not summon the will to fight the order. One by one, they sank back into their seats, the reluctant agreement etched into their silence. Outside, the crowd erupted, the barricades shaking as chants rose to the heavens. The scene was broadcast on split screen. Inside, a chamber delivering judgment. Outside, a nation celebrating what the media immediately declared a historic moment of accountability. Anchors' voices cracked with awe. "We've never seen anything like this," truth forced into the open by both Congress and the people. Jasmine sat still, but her eyes burned with quiet triumph. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't raged. She had held the line until the truth itself became unavoidable. And as America watched, the question thundered into every living room, every diner, every restless heart: Will the truth finally come out or be buried even deeper? The gavel's echo had barely faded when the sound outside swallowed Washington whole. The barricades shook under the roar of thousands. Health plus truth equals strength. A chant that now felt less like protest and more like anthem. The crowd surged forward, flags waving, fists pumping, the night sky above the Capitol lit by camera flashes like lightning bolts. When Jasmine stepped out onto the marble steps, the reaction was volcanic. The cheers crashed over her in waves, chants of her name rising and falling like a drumbeat of defiance. Some wept openly, clutching signs, reaching out hands just to touch the woman who had stood her ground against an entire machine. Among the faces, older citizens stood with tears brimming, recalling another era. "I remember JFK's fitness tests," one veteran shouted, his voice trembling. "That was about building a strong America. But this is about saving its soul." Beside him, a grandmother nodded, whispering to her granddaughter, "Strength isn't in muscles, it's in truth." Their words spread through the crowd, a bridge between generations, between memory and the moment exploding before them. The mood was electric but layered relief at the verdict, pride in Jasmine's courage, yet a lingering doubt hung heavy. Would the truth survive the next 48 hours, or would it be smothered again by power? The cheers masked the unease, but the question lived in every heart beating on those steps. The cameras captured it all, Jasmine raising her hand to acknowledge the people, her face illuminated not just by the lights but by something deeper resolve. And as the roar of the crowd rolled across the city, one question thundered louder than any cheer: can a single voice truly ignite a nation's conscience? The night air was electric as Jasmine Crockett stepped to the podium on the Capitol steps. The crowds were softening into an expectant hush. The cameras tightened on her face, lit by floodlights and the glow of thousands of phones raised high. Her voice rang out, steady, sharp, unyielding. "No president is above truth, no community is beneath its protection." The words struck like a verdict, echoing across the plaza and into living rooms across the nation. The cameras panned wide, catching a scene that felt like history reborn. Citizens young and old were dropping to the ground in unison, attempting push-ups and sit-ups, holding signs that read, "Truth makes America strong." Their bodies shook with effort, but their voices shook louder. "Truth, truth, truth." The chant thundered through the city, browning the last remnants of denial. Jasmine raised her hand, her eyes fierce with conviction. "Justice is strength," she declared, her voice swelling with the weight of the moment. "Transparency is healing, and only truth can carry this nation forward." The words weren't just heard, they were felt, searing themselves into the conscience of a country that had teetered on the edge of deception for too long. The crowd erupted again, not in chaos, but in unity. Tear-streaked faces, strangers embraced. And across the world, headlines flared, "Crockett redefines strength." Social media flooded with images of citizens exercising on the Capitol steps, their signs held high as if they were shields. The camera zoomed one final time on Jasmine's face, her eyes unblinking, her voice cutting through the roar. And as the screen faded to black, her final question lingered, daring America to answer for itself: would you choose comforting slogans or the hard truth that saves lives? In every society, true strength is not measured by slogans, appearances, or stage performances. It is measured by the courage to face truth, however uncomfortable it may be. Jasmine's fight reminds us that honesty is not weakness, but the very foundation of trust and justice. Transparency heals, because only when we confront reality can we protect those most vulnerable and build a future worth believing in. The lesson is simple yet profound. Silence hides wounds, but truth sparks healing. If you were in Jasmine's place, would you choose to stay silent or speak the truth that could save others? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.